Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Earth Institute coffee morning. It's quite a different topic today, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's a fascinating area that's really grown in profile substantially in the last few months. It's a great pleasure to welcome Paul Ennis, who's a new member of the Earth Institute and a long-standing enthusiast for cryptocurrencies, a long-standing interest of his, and suddenly it's become something that everyone wants to know more about. So I'm delighted that he's going to share his insights with us on the competing imaginaries of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and also the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies. So thanks very much, Paul.
Hello, everybody. So what I want to do today is I just want to talk about I guess the part of cryptocurrency that might be most relevant to the Earth Institute. So I want to explain why it is that Bitcoin's carbon footprint is as large as Sri Lanka's or Jordan. So that's like the annual carbon footprint of the Bitcoin network. Also, why Bitcoin culture isn't fazed by this. Why does the average Bitcoiner not care about this? And why it is that they're not going to change, right? They're not going to change their carbon footprint. Then I want to introduce Ethereum, talk a little bit about why Ethereum intends to address this. So why it is that Ethereum has this like ecological desire to change the ecological problem of cryptocurrencies, and why it is that Ethereum culture is more amenable to making this happen. Oh yeah, and the crypto kitties is just there because I needed an image. So typically in my research in the coding value group in the College of Business, we typically understand cryptocurrencies as forms of culture. So we don't focus on the economic output of cryptocurrencies or the price of cryptocurrencies. That's kind of like the headline stuff, right? You see in the media how much a cryptocurrency costs. In ethnographic studies that we've done, and this would bear out my own ethnographic studies of cryptocurrency, and also as a participant, someone who's very involved in these worlds, is that it's not really the price of a cryptocurrency that's important to people, although that's a nice bonus or a nice benefit. What really matters to people is the idea that it allows you to practice some kind of alternative economic world vision, whatever way you want to think about it, or a narrative. So people who aren't served well by the inherited financial system, they're generally drawn to cryptocurrencies for that reason. The idea of some kind of world where you can participate economically on a level playing field. So for me, that's the people work society strand that I would kind of want to emphasize, that cryptocurrencies have this alternative post-capitalist side to them as well. Most evident in things like Dogecoin, which don't really make sense unless you understand that it's sort of a alternative economic system. Okay, so then cryptocurrency cultures, they're typically organized, or we would say they're organized in their work as forms of blockocracy. So blockocracies mean the way in which they're designed and the way in which they're governed. So the way in which they're kind of structured, they're designed usually to express some kind of cultural imaginary. So they're expressing some kind of culture that the cryptocurrency community would like to see in the world. So yeah, so this is again, this is something that I want to introduce, is the idea of the pluralist cryptocurrency space. There's 8,500 cryptocurrencies, each of which expresses its own cultural imaginary. So we don't just have a monolithic culture called Bitcoin, we have many, many different crypto cultures. Cultural imaginary, using this in the kind of Taylor way, the collective practices that make up our social life. We could also get fancy philosophy and call this like Heidegger, the implicit background and all that kind of thing. Okay, so the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, the famous creator of Bitcoin who abandoned Bitcoin in 2010, still anonymous, we have no idea who this person is. When they created Bitcoin, they wanted to prefigure a kind of alternative economic system. So prefiguration means creating the world you want to see in the future, in the here and now. It comes from anarchist, post-capitalist cultures. So yeah, so you create a project like Bitcoin as a sort of alternative in the here and now to the dominant economic system. So he appealed to two different groups, two different cultural imaginaries to make this happen. The first is the cypherpunks, who are interested in Bitcoin as a form of digital cash. So cash in the sense of something you exchange with people peer-to-peer or very directly. So, you know, off books, kind of a cash anti-government philosophy going on there. So they're digital privacy activists. They're interested in open source culture, all that kind of stuff. They're very cooperativist, so they're building Bitcoin as a shared infrastructure. They're very left-wing libertarian. So I don't mean left-wing as in socialist or Marxist, left-wing libertarians. So they're market-oriented, but very socially progressive, and they're okay with the idea of mutually working together to achieve some kind of community that's, you know, like an anarchist community, say. Now, on the other hand, there's another strand that you're probably more familiar with or that you associate with Bitcoin, which is the idea of crypto anarchy. So the other group that Satoshi appealed to, they're the classic individualist, right-wing libertarian kind of core of Bitcoin that you'll see today. They're interested in deflationary economics, and they're interested in the idea of Bitcoin as a kind of digital gold. So Bitcoin has this cap, this scarcity cap of 21 million Bitcoins that can't be moved up. And so the idea is that the government can't manipulate Bitcoin the same way they manipulate fiat currency. Now that's their economics. That's not my position. That's just how they see economics. Okay, now over time, one of these cultural imaginaries has come to dominate, which is the crypto anarchist or the gold one. And I think this is very consequential, right? This is all to do with the ecological problem, right? Why is it that the Bitcoiners won't remove the wasteful electricity output? And it's because this crypto anarchist imaginary is so central to their identity. It is essentially what Bitcoin is: mining for Bitcoins, mining for digital gold. But what exactly is this digital gold in practice? So what exactly does this mean when you're actually doing it? Well, it's essentially computational expenditure. And I'll go through exactly what that looks like in a second. So the computational expenditure is what generates Bitcoin's carbon footprint, and that this is like central to Bitcoin's identity. Now, I'll have to explain how Bitcoin works very, very briefly. Normally, this takes me about 4 lectures. I'm going to do it in about 20, 30 seconds. So the cypherpunk idea of Bitcoin here is, right, you download a piece of software, you all agree that you're a part of a network that believes that something called Bitcoin is a currency, and then you exchange Bitcoins to each other peer-to-peer, right? So there's no central authority, there's no like PayPal, there's no bank or whatever. You're just downloading software, you're a network, you share Bitcoins. The same way maybe music file sharing would be a good analogy. So that's supposed to be the digital cash part, right? The cypherpunk part, where you're just working together to cooperate to make Bitcoins a thing. Then the next part of it is the mining part. So when I send Bitcoins to somebody else in this network, there is a group of people, originally all people, but a group of people now, a specialist class of people. They collect all the transactions, they put them into a page in the ledger, a block in Bitcoin. And then at the same time, they race to find the puzzle solution. First person to find the puzzle solution, their next page of the ledger or their next block in the chain of blocks, the infamous blockchain, gets to be the next person. They win Bitcoins for doing this. And that's the mining for Bitcoin, right? They maintain the ledger and then they race to find the puzzle solution. First person gets those Bitcoins. And that's the way that money is introduced, right? So that's the Bitcoin mining process. So now in practice, so the original Bitcoin system really had this idea of like downloading the software and kind of participating in that kind of way. But in reality, what happened is that people declined to download the software and be their own bank. That was sort of the original motif back in the day. And instead, what they did is they didn't download the software. They just used centralized exchanges, right? They signed up to these exchanges like Coinbase, the one that you saw recently did its IPO, or Binance, all these different exchanges. And so you're basically using a centralized exchange where you sign up, it's an account and your Bitcoins are on there, right? You're not really a cypherpunk, you're not really the Bitcoin network. You're just sort of like outsourcing that to the exchange. And so over time, the cash element, the idea of exchanging Bitcoins peer-to-peer has slowly disappeared over time. In fact, many of you may not even know that Bitcoin was originally designed to have these twin parallel cash gold images. We only hear about the gold part these days. And so the cash part has disappeared. The Bitcoin white paper, the title of it is Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It's not a gold system. Now, this means that over time, what's really happened is that the crypto anarchist gold imaginary has come to dominate. So what we see today is basically the logical extension of this dominance, which is that people just mostly exchange Bitcoins on exchanges. So the speculation, all that obsession with the price, and then also this accumulation of mining, right? This obsession with like getting as many Bitcoins as possible before they run out, because right, they have a cap, so they will eventually disappear. Okay, so mining, what exactly is it, right? What is all this fuss about? What's all this electricity kind of carbon footprint? Where's all this coming from? So in the original Bitcoin system, every user was a peer, right? So you downloaded the software, and then if you wanted to, right, this is something it would be a choice. You just wrote into the console, get mining info, you start mining away, you might win some Bitcoins, you don't realize they're valuable, and you might spend them like a bit of an idiot. So that's the way it was back then. And it was really easy to do because everybody in the network was, kind of knew each other. There wasn't that many people. It was a small world. And so you actually had a genuine chance of like winning the puzzle solution. So you could do this on your CPU, right? Your central processing unit, your laptop, or your home computer. Now, eventually, people realized that they could, use more computational power in order to have a better chance of winning the puzzle, right? More people are joining the network. Bitcoin's price is going up. So I want to have like more computational power so that I can win the next block. And so that's where we see the introduction here of the GPU, the graphics processing unit, the video card. You can see me back in the day as the angry NAMA worker using my GeForce GTX, right, my video game card to mine for Bitcoins back in 2012, right, back in sort of the golden era. Now, the next thing that happens is that people get into an arms race, right? If you've got a GPU, well, I'm going to buy an ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit. This is a museum piece that I show my students, the very first Bitcoin miner, the Antminer S1, which you ordered dodgily from China. And then every single chip on here all it does is mine for Bitcoins, right? That's its only job. This machine only mines Bitcoins, does nothing else, its own purpose, takes a lot of electricity from the wall. And so right now I'm using an ASIC. What does the next person do? They buy 2 and then 3 and 4 and 5. And before you know it, you're pushed out of it. So the current scenario in Bitcoin today is that Bitcoin mining just involves around 7 to 10 companies, mostly based in China. 70% of the miners are based in China. And you can fit all these guys on a stage. In fact, they were on a stage in 2015 at one point. And so all we have at the moment are these industrial-sized mining farms that do nothing but mine for Bitcoin. That's all they do. And that's sort of the scenario that we're in today, right? So that's the kind of situation with Bitcoin as it exists in 2021. Now, the alternative that I want to just posit, and I won't spend too much time on this, is that, okay, there's the idea of Bitcoin as this, ledger with a scarce gold. That's one form of cryptocurrency, and it's probably the form of cryptocurrency that you're most familiar with, but it's not the only concept of what like a cryptocurrency can do. There are alternatives, and in particular, I would try to introduce Ethereum as an alternative that would be of interest to people in the Earth Institute if you're looking for a more socially minded cryptocurrency. So in Ethereum, instead of just being a ledger, it's a shared world computer, right? We're a network that shares a computer. Anybody is free to leverage that world computer for whatever they want to do, right? It's agnostic as to the purpose. So there's a more public good commons perspective built into Ethereum. And the creator of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, has written papers on this idea of the public goods infrastructure concept of Ethereum. So this all comes back to the idea of Ethereum being more, it skews demographically younger. It's more cypherpunk, right? It's more corporatist and left-wing libertarian. It rejects the kind of speculation, hoarding concept of cryptocurrency prevalent in Bitcoin. So basically what I'd like to push back against, or what I find myself pushing back against very often, is the conflation of Bitcoin with like Ethereum or Bitcoin with other cryptocurrencies. There are many crypto cultures. They're not all operating from the same kind of logic as Bitcoin. So we don't even have the idea of a scarce digital gold in Ethereum. It's a more like kind of inflationary type currency, but it's also more functional, right? The currency that exists in Ethereum is meant to be used. I know this from my own experience. I use it quite a bit. Now, probably the most important thing, which I'll come to a conclusion with, is that Ethereum is transitioning away from this wasteful, ecologically, the carbon footprint kind of craziness that we associate with Bitcoin. The cooperativist culture of Ethereum wants to move away from this and is in the process now of moving away from mining, so proof of work as it's officially called, and moving to something called staking, right? So eventually, we're in the process now of transitioning away from this wasteful mechanism called proof of work to proof of stake. So in proof of work, you have a small number of companies that dominate the mining scenario. They're very, very centralized. So they need all these machines, these ASIC machines and those giant factories, and they have high energy consumption. It's like unsustainable and so on. So beginning now, this is already a process that started. By the summer, it will be pretty well gone. By this time next year, it should definitely be a complete transition known as Ethereum 2.0. The consensus mechanism will be this. It will be proof of stake. In this scenario, you just download some software, you have 32 Ether, and then you're able to participate in the maintenance of the ledger. And then if you behave badly, you lose your stake. But there's no hardware here. You just download like a wallet, like the equivalent of a wallet, and then it's going to use as much electricity as someone using maybe Adobe Photoshop or somebody like just in a normal everyday office. So we'll eliminate the energy consumption part by this time next year, basically. So in conclusion, don't hold out hopes for the Bitcoin community eliminating mining. It's essential to their cultural imaginary. It is like their essence, their definition, their metaphysics. It's not going anywhere. They might give you some performative green energy talk, but I take that with a pinch of salt. So I would just look to like Ethereum, and I often say to my students that I believe Ethereum will win because it's got this more ecologically minded kind of message, and just realistically, the mainstream is going to adopt that over Bitcoin, I believe, in time. Okay.
That's fantastic, Paul. Thanks ever so much. Really fascinating insight into a whole different world. I was fascinated by your initial kind of comments about it being fundamentally a cultural movement rather than a sort of economic sort of a position, I suppose. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how the culture works? Is it it's a network of people? You talked about the puzzle solving element of it. There's a sort of competition to solve the next puzzle. Is there also a kind of a chat culture? As you say, people kind of know each other. There's a social kind of element to it in a big way.
Yeah, I often say to people that like the most incorrect reading of the most incorrect sense of like what the experience of cryptocurrency is that people imagine it as some kind of like technical scenario where you're sitting there coding away, doing smart contracts and all this kind of stuff. Most of your time in the cryptocurrency space is spent on Discord or on Reddit, debating the kind of vision or direction of the project or micromanaging certain decisions. So so let's say major decisions will happen. There's kind of this distinction between like on-chain and off-chain governance. So like big things happen on the blockchain, and they're very rare. Like, if there's a kind of like community decision, it will happen on the blockchain. But 90% of what's happening is, you're just kind of hanging out in Discord and you're, just like discussing like community kind of issues, memes, all that kind of thing. So it's very, very socially oriented.
Fantastic, thanks. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Thanks very much. That was a really, really interesting discussion and talk, and most of it's gone over my head. I wonder, I guess, about in terms of the research that you're doing. I guess I would have questions in terms of your. It sounds like you're almost. I don't want to say the word invested, because that's probably the wrong word. But I mean, like you've been doing this a long time. I just wonder about your independence in the research, and would you might like to comment about that, and whether other people kind of suggest the opposite, is the literature moving in one direction or the other. I'm just wondering, do people, say, who are not involved in cryptocurrency or mining have a different attitude than yourself? Or I guess, just if you could comment on that.
Yeah. So I'm always very clear. Well, actually, sometimes I don't really need to say to people that like I'm very clearly an advocate for cryptocurrency. It becomes very apparent very quickly. It depends. So in my actual, say, like published research, usually much more critical, and then in talks I'm a little bit more sympathetic. So the position, I would share the critique of cryptocurrency for the most part, like for the harshest critics of it, like I share. So I share the same critique of the wastefulness of, say, Bitcoin, of the energy consumption, and also Ethereum now. So as it exists, the fact that it currently uses like that same process. I'm also very critical of the the libertarian streak. So the libertarian kind of like, it's still kind of like embedded in the culture quite heavily. I'm a critic of the economics. I think the economics is often very wrong-headed, especially like the deflationary kind of like economics and so on. So yeah, I'm actually much more critical than I may be kind of giving out, that I'm getting across here. But I do like to, at least, I do like well, I guess the positive aspect that I find in it is that for a lot of people, it represents the only alternative economic option out there. It's a kind of, it's very similar to Wall Street bets, where there's a certain kind of anger toward the inherited financial system that I think is genuine, and that I think is maybe, so whilst I'm critical, I do think that there's something very positive in the attempt to genuinely create an alternative. So yeah, so I'm sympathetic, but yeah, I'm definitely not blind to the folly that goes on. There's a lot of folly in the cryptocurrency space. So for a good example would be the NFT blockchain art extravagance. For me, this is like just completely illogical market hype speculation. So there's a lot to dislike.
Great. Yeah. Could I ask a follow-up question about the environmental impacts? I mean, am I wrong in thinking that once the mining of Bitcoin is finished, whenever it gets to the 21 million, will that environmental impact disappear, or will we still have issues associated with it? I mean, once we get to that endpoint.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a tricky thing here, because there's 18 million Bitcoins mined at the moment. But so that kind of gives the impression that Bitcoin mining will end relatively soon, but the puzzle that you have to solve gets progressively harder. So at the moment, so the last few million Bitcoins are going to take a very, very long time. So it's going to be like 100 years before the last Bitcoin is mined. So there's a good bit of time. So yeah, it does mean that they will eventually drop the puzzle solution aspect for it. At that stage, it transitions over to a purely fee-based market. So people will just like pay more to get picked up in the next block kind of scenario. But yeah, it's not for like 100 years. So I don't think I don't think we have the 100 years, unfortunately.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Finbar. And anybody else want to ask any questions? The other part, sorry, Mona, go ahead.
So let's unmute myself. First of all, thank you so much for a nice, interesting topic. So I have one question. I'm not sure if it's directly related to the topic or not, but I want to know, as we know, one of the main steps in environmental impact assessment is public awareness and public acceptance. And as we know, digital currency is somehow a very new concept, and I want to know that, are there any studies, any researchers about public acceptance and public awareness? Because I'm sure that many of people are not familiar with digital currencies. Would you please explain? Thank you.
Sorry, are there any studies about
public acceptance, public awareness
of cryptocurrencies in general?
Yes, and also about the digital currencies.
And the environmental impact side, particularly, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. The environmental impact. No, none that I know of. I mean, so one of the reasons I kind of got drawn into the sort of into this area of like the ecological side of things is because there's so little about this that it's something I basically feel that I might need to do myself. There's only really, so this is sort of a major problem in the cryptocurrency literature broadly, which is that we mostly have technical articles or financial articles and very little social science material and very few studies of qualitative research into people's attitudes. And there is a kind of reason for this, which is that until very, very recently, so until like maybe last year, there hasn't really been an expectation that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies would be so mainstream as that you would need to kind of canvas. It's always been treated as a subcultural movement. And that's how I've traditionally treated it. And it's only really over the last year where I've said, okay, where the basically this kind of dyad between Bitcoin and Ethereum, like this has emerged for me as a question precisely because when I'm teaching this, my students typically will bring up like why do they prefer Ethereum? Because they believe, generally speaking, the mainstream society will adopt it over Bitcoin because of proof of stake as like an ecologically viable or more viable option. So that's sort of like, so the lack of these kind of studies is kind of how I've ended up wanting to focus on this area. So yeah, there's not enough at all.
Thank you.
Augustine.
Yeah, just to say about the NFTs there, I think, you know, with the whole explosion of that, what has come from it is a huge debate within the art community around the environmental impact of it. And it's something I never kind of really heard about or anything before, but even within the last month, it's kind of the whole thing now is being dominated by the environmental impact of it, which is kind of really interesting because suddenly there was a, you know, huge excitement about it all, and now suddenly it's all turned about into a debate around the environmental impact, which is kind of really interesting, I think, you know.
Yeah, so the like NFTs are actually, you could probably say that the reason, like at least one of the reasons why cryptocurrencies are really beyond the price of Bitcoin, the, you know, the absurd kind of price of Bitcoin, like, you know, $50,000 at the moment. And even Ethereum today is like, Ethereum is the all-time high the last 2 days, $3,500 US, which is again quite crazy. So yeah, it's the price of cryptocurrency, and it's also the NFT art that has reached the mainstream. And I think what they've both raised and like, so basically every time cryptocurrency is introducing something new, like this like new all-time high of Bitcoin or new NFT blockchain art, within like a week there is a piece that raises the energy question, the ecological impact. So I think it's becoming this like point of tension in the cryptocurrency community where they're aware of it, but the Bitcoin community is in the process of basically suppressing it and hoping it goes away, or else giving this kind of like green talk. Or what they also tend to do is they turn the tables and they say, there's an article in Bitcoin magazine this week about how the banks use more electricity than, you know, or you know, energy than a Bitcoin itself. So you get this kind of turning it around kind of thing. And then like NFT art as well, because like the art community isn't a community which is just going to say like green issues are not of interest to us, right? They're switched on, socially conscious people. So if you're introducing a new medium of art, you can't just say, well, oh yeah, one of the side effects of this is that it has like an outrageous environmental impact and that we don't care. But I think the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum then, so NFT art, it doesn't exist on Bitcoin. It can't exist there for reasons which are, so basically Bitcoin, it's just a ledger, right? It just tracks the movement of Bitcoins. Ethereum's a computer, so you can build anything on it. So the NFT art, it lives on Ethereum. It doesn't live on Bitcoin. They're two separate worlds. And that's why I have the NFT art back here. This is like me signaling to people, that's like an Ethereum thing to signal. So the reaction of the Ethereum community isn't to say, well, who cares? That's what the Bitcoin community would say. The Ethereum community says, okay, this is a problem and we're trying to fix it. So at the moment, they're encouraging people to use what's known as layer 2, which is a technical solution, a kind of temporary technical solution. And then they're also saying, okay, we recognize there's a problem now, but we are trying to transition away. It's like, we know we're problematic, but we're trying to fix it. Like, that's the Ethereum attitude. There's also other, a lot of NFT art at the moment has basically switched to other cryptocurrency chains. So Flow would be an example, Manage. These are like low energy. Some of them have been designed specifically for NFT blockchain art. So that's been the approach. One of the good things about cryptocurrency is that it's very versatile and malleable. So if they have a problem, they collectively get together and they can solve it, you know.
Thanks very much. So we're out of time. I still have a lot of curiosity around this, but I think we better draw a line. So it is fascinating, really fascinating insight, especially for me to understand more the cultural side of the whole phenomenon. So really great stuff. So thanks very much again, Paul. And I'm sure if other people have further questions, you would entertain them by email afterwards if people want to get in touch. Great. Thanks very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.